Hi, I'm Tommy Mester from data36.com, and this is the third episode of my SQL tutorial series. In the first two episodes, we learned the basics, like how to write a simple SQL query, how to filter for specific rows using where, how to order your results with order by, how to create segments with group by, and a few more important things. So in this episode, we will take a break and I will show you a few SQL best practices that will help you to make less mistakes and be more efficient when working with SQL. Just a quick comment before we get started. If this is your first time here, maybe you want to start with the first episode of my SQL tutorial series, where we have started with the basics of SQL. I also have a video where I show you how to install SQL on a remote server, so you can do the coding with me if you want to. I link this in the description, and here is my quick recommendation on how to use my tutorials to learn SQL in the most efficient way. First, watch this video. You don't have to do anything, just go through it, watch it, process it. With that, you will see how things work, what do I do and why, and then go to the article version of this video that I linked in the description as well. This article version lists the full code base that I will use here. So after watching this video, I encourage you to check out the article and do the coding part for yourself as well. Watching someone code and writing code are two completely different experiences. And if you want to actually learn and use SQL, you should write the code by yourself. Anyways, let's get started. The first best practice is about the order of your SQL keywords, and this is not even a best practice, this is a must, because the order of your SQL keywords counts in your query. And let's start with something simple just for the demonstration. So select everything from flight delays, where let's say depth delay is greater than 100, and that's it for now. And back to our flight delays table, and just for the sake of demonstration, I will group by origin, and I will run a count function, and I will also order by origin. Good. There it is. And for now, I only use the SQL keywords we have learned so far, and the proper order of these SQL keywords is select, from, where, group by, order by, and limit. If you don't use it in this order, your SQL query won't work. Simple as that. But it's also good to know that this is not the same order in which the computer processes the query. The logical order is this: from, where, group by, select, order by, and limit. SQL first checks which data table we will work with, then it checks the filters, after that it groups the data, finally it gets the data, and if necessary, sorts it and prints, well, in this case, only the first 10 rows. It's great to keep this logic in mind, but the writing order is more important for now, so learn that one. But later on, when you will write more complex SQL queries, it will be also really useful to know the execution order, because knowing that will help you avoid a few logical errors in your queries. Okay, this was the first SQL best practice. Well, this wasn't a best practice as is, but let's move forward and I will continue with the second SQL best practice, and it's about formatting. And you have seen me write queries in different styles. Let me copy paste one here. So a basic style that I used was this. I loaded too many rows. Let me use a limit clause here. Better. But let's get back to formatting. So I have used this style. I have also used something like this. It will return the very same result, only the formatting changes. And maybe you have seen me using something like this as well. Again, the same result will be returned, only the formatting of the query changes. So these three were the very same query because spaces and line breaks do not affect the outcome of an SQL query. The only thing that matters is the semicolon that clearly indicates the end of the SQL query. But apart from that, you can use as many spaces and line breaks between the different keywords as you want. So the big question is, which style is the best? And there is nothing like a set in stone rule to answer this question. It depends on many things and mostly on personal preference, but just in general, people tend to use this version C. Why is that? It's simple, because that's the easiest to read. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference in a short query like this one. See, this first one is just as much readable as this second one. So it doesn't matter in a short query, but it does make a huge difference in a very complex SQL query, where we use even 100 or more lines in our query. And being organized with your SQL queries is key to avoid unnecessary headaches while you are debugging your code. And let me just copy paste here a longer SQL query from one of my online courses, the SQL online course that I created. As you can see, this is a pretty complex SQL query. Not too complex, but this is the level of complexity where formatting really matters. It's easier to see what is what, and when it comes to debugging, it will be much easier as well. It could be nicer. I could have broken this into more lines, and so on, but I guess you get the point. And you can experiment with your own style, but I suggest following these three simple recommendations. First, use line breaks at least before the main SQL keywords like select, from, where, and I prefer to use them before column names. Let me remove this. And so I use line breaks before column names and table names as well. And if I have multiple where conditions, then I also break those into more lines. 2. Use indentation for column names, table names, where conditions, and so on. And 3. Stay consistent. Okay, let's see the third SQL best practice, which is about uppercase and lowercase characters. And I have already mentioned in the first episode of this SQL tutorial series that SQL is not case sensitive for the SQL keywords like select, from, where, and so on. But it can be case sensitive for column names, table names, and field values. This depends on your settings. And for the PostgreSQL database we use in these tutorials, only field values are case sensitive. Regardless, it's quite common to keep these best practices. First, all reserved SQL keywords like select, from, where, and so on should be written in capitals, and all column names and table names should be written in lowercase, except of course special situations when the name of the column contains uppercase characters initially. Anyways, in these tutorials, you should really watch out for the field values, because depending on which table we use and which column we use from these tables, sometimes it will contain uppercase, sometimes it will contain lowercase characters, and if you use the wrong format, you will get wrong results returned to your screen. A rule of thumb that I follow when I use these settings, and I usually use these settings with PostgreSQL, is that anything that comes between apostrophes is case sensitive, so I watch out for those with a special attention. For instance, as you can see in the origin column, we have uppercase characters, so I refer to that with uppercase characters in the query. But in our zoo table, we mostly had lowercase characters. So if I filter for elephants, I have to use the very same format. This will work or not. Oh, where animal equals elephant. So this will work. This won't work. Anyways, let's move on and go to our fourth SQL best practice, which is about aliases. And for demonstrating that, I will write another query that contains an SQL function like select, let's say, origins from the flight delays table, and I will group by origin. And the function that I will use will be, let's say, average depth delay. I could have chosen anything. This is just for the sake of demonstration. Whoops, I missed a comma here. That's why I can't see the origin column in the returned results. Now it's better. Actually, I like it better this way. Okay. Cool. So the trick is, and we have talked about this before, that when you use an SQL function, it will automatically give new names to your newly generated columns by default. For example, when we have calculated averages in this SQL query, the new column's name that contains the actual averages is average AVG, and again, this name is an automatically generated default name by SQL. But we can change this, and after a while, in more complex queries, we will have to change these, and for that, we can use aliases. It's pretty simple, by the way, and for instance, in this query, if we want to see average depth delay instead of AVG, we can achieve it like this. Simply add an S keyword, and I type the new name, which is average depth delay, average underscore depth delay. Let's run this query. There you go. This is the new name, and of course you can do this with any columns, even with table names. You can shorten column names. I can refer to origin as O. I can refer to flight delays as FD. And in fact, if I refer to the origin column as O, I can use it in the group by clause as well as O from this point on, and the grouping will happen just as if it were origin. It doesn't really matter in this case. And this SQL AS keyword, or in other words, the aliasing, will be very, very handy in the next episode, where I will introduce the SQL join clause, and we will join different tables. In those queries where we will join tables, or just in general in very complex SQL queries where we refer to different columns and different values in multiple ways, it's always good to use aliases and rename our columns and give them specific names, because when we refer to one thing multiple times, or when we run the same function on different tables, or when we join tables that have the same column names, and we don't use aliases, things can get ambiguous and the SQL query will fail. I mean, this will be much clearer when we will write the exact queries, and I will get back to that in the next episodes. But for now, just remember how to use aliases and remember that it's important. So that was it. I just simply renamed the automatically generated average name with the S keyword to anything that I prefer, in this case, average depth delay. Before we head over to the next best practice, I just wanted to mention two more things for aliases. The first one is that this S keyword assigns the new header name temporarily. The change is effective only in the specific SQL query that you run, and so it doesn't rename the column name in the actual table. And the second one is that, well, this is a very silly example that I used here. The whole point, when you use the S keyword, you actually want to simplify and shorten the names and make them readable and more usable in your code. So be pragmatic and be smarter than I was here when you use aliases. And this could be average depth, or I don't know. You figure out something smarter. But I move on and let's talk about the fifth SQL best practice, which is a really important one, and it's commenting. And commenting your code is highly recommended basically in any programming language. For instance, if you are working in a team, it helps the team to understand your code. But you should comment for your own best practice as well, because if you write a query today, I guarantee that in 1 year you won't have a clue what you meant with your query. So the next SQL best practice is about helping yourself remember stuff. I like to look at commenting as sending messages to myself into the future, and I have to tell you, it's always a pleasure to receive these kind of messages from my past self, but of course, on the other hand, many times I'm also very angry that past me wasn't more detailed. Anyway, commenting is important, no question about that, but how can you do it in SQL? Let's see that. Very simple. Type this dash dash, and after the double dash, nothing in that line will be executed. You can type hello, this is a comment, or you can type this is a comment as well. If you run it, you will see that you will get the same results. None of these comments will be executed. So again, this can come as a new line or at the end of your line where you have an SQL keyword already. Cool, that's commenting and you should use it all the time. The sixth SQL best practice is about using column names, and there's a little trick that you will meet sooner or later. So I want you to hear it from me first to avoid any trouble in the future. When you use order by and group by, you can of course use the column names as we have done so far. So let me add order by clause here, order by origin. And actually you can use and refer to your columns with numbers. In this case, for instance, I can replace the origin column name with its number. This is the first column, and if I want to order by the first column, I can use 1. Very same result. Or if I want to order by the second column, in this case, the average underscore depth column, I can use that too. See? So in this case, the number 2 after the order by clause refers to average underscore depth. That's the second column in our query. And I want you to try this out for yourself and then never use it again. So I don't want to use this anymore. And why is that? Well, imagine a very common scenario. You tweak your query and you add an extra column like, just the sum depth delay here. And if you use column names, everything would work just fine. But if you use column numbers instead, your query will order by the wrong column. Whoops, depth delay. See, in this case, your results are ordered by the sum depth column, which is the second column, of course. But in fact, I wanted to order by the average underscore depth column. Anyways, I just recommend to do yourself a big favor and don't add unnecessary points of failure to your query. Your job will be just complicated enough without these as well. So the 6 SQL best practices: always use the actual name, so in this case, average depth of the columns when you refer to them, either in order by or group by or anywhere else in your queries, and never use this number format. And here comes the last SQL best practice for today, which is avoid selecting all columns. And remember the first episode where I said that this is the base query you will have to learn, use, and expand most of the time? Well, now you know enough about SQL to learn the terrible truth. We don't really use this little asterisk character in real data projects or in real life queries at all. There are tons of good reasons for that, but the top two are efficiency and readability, and it makes sense. Most of the times you will need only one column from a table, so why would you print all of them? It would mean you have to move more data from your SQL server to your computer, slowing down the process unnecessarily. And at the same time, if you select all columns, so you use this asterisk character and not column names in your query, you won't have any clue what columns you have in your data table when you want to change something. And let me just give you an example for that from flight delays, limit 10. In real life, you won't really use this format. You will be using something like this, more likely depth, delay, and I don't know, distance. So specific columns. Cool. Point is, use column names and not the asterisk. Okay, this is pretty much it for today. Those were the most important SQL best practices I wanted to share, and I hope they will help you be more efficient and practical with your SQL tasks. If you want to read more about SQL styles and formatting, I added a more detailed guide by Simon Halliwell to the description. In the next episode, we will start to join SQL tables, which is one of the most well-known and appreciated features of SQL. By the way, when you are watching this video, maybe it's already published, and if so, you will definitely find a link for it in the description. Anyways, this is the end of this video. If you liked it, please leave a like, or even better, a comment. And if you want to learn more about SQL, you have quite a few options. As I said, I really encourage you to check out the article version of this video on the Data36 blog and do the coding part yourself as well. I've also created a free SQL cheat sheet that you can download by subscribing to my newsletter at data36.com/newsletter. And if you want to become absolutely confident with SQL, you can check out my 7-day 0 to intermediate level SQL online course as well, where next to the tutorials, I added many tasks for practicing as well. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'm Tomi Mester from data36.com. Until next time.